In 8th grade, I remember someone from the driver's ed program at the high school passing out brochures for students looking to get a head start. I took the brochure home to ask my mom if we had $300 for me to take the course and begin the process of getting my driver's permit. My mom told me that we couldn't afford it. This was 2009. I would ask the same question again and again and be told no for a couple of years. The main reasons were either that we couldn't afford driver's ed or my mom didn't trust me to drive the car. If you're wondering why I didn't just pay for driver's ed myself, it's because I wasn't allowed to get a job because I was supposed to focus on school. This went on even after my sister, who was younger than me by 2 years, had a job at 14. When I finally was allowed to take my permit test, it was probably 2013, I passed the second time I took it. Anytime my mother would take me out driving, she would grip the bar that is hanging from the ceiling, scream at me, and make me pull over and trade places with her. If you can't tell, my relationship with her was pretty strained around this time. I had maybe 2 or 3 hours of practice with her. When I took my driver's test, she made me fake the driving log. The lady I took my test with was a stoic, grumpy old hag who basically didn't respond to anything I said. Guess what? I failed. No surprise there. I rescheduled the test for 2 weeks later, and on the day of the test, I woke up early and I readied myself to pass it this time. I went to my mom's room to ask her when we could leave, and she told me that she would not be taking me because I would just fail again. Shortly after this, I left for college. If you've seen my video on why I left art school, then you know the basics of my college experience and that I failed out of art school, then worked my ass off to finish college in 3 years. I couldn't learn to drive in Chicago, and my attempts at trying to learn with my mom once again, or scheduling adult driving lessons in my college town in Indiana, didn't go over well. I was feeling like I could finally start to learn how to drive again in 2016, but then I was in a very bad car accident that shattered me. A friend of mine had helped me move my stuff into a storage unit earlier that day, and we were picking up her car from the shop after lunch. On our way to her house, we turned left at a red light, and we were T-boned by an oncoming Jeep that had blown through a red light. The point of impact was the right front wheel. I couldn't even get out of the car using the passenger side door. If the impact point had been a few feet more towards the back, I would have been dead. I had to crawl out of the driver's side, the car was totaled instantly, and my friend had to get a new one. I don't know why I didn't die that day, but I spent the next few weeks wondering if I should have, and tensing up to a painful extent every time I had to be in a car. I trusted very few people to drive me safely, mostly just my mom and my boyfriend. These, amongst other PTSD symptoms, lasted at least a year, and I don't think I ever felt comfortable in a car again until I learned how to drive. When I graduated college in May 2017, I had already accepted a position in a different state which would begin in early June. This meant I had about a month to get my driver's license. With little time left and several failed attempts at scheduling adult driving lessons, my boyfriend offered to teach me how to drive. I was amazed at how much easier it was to learn when the person teaching me was gentle but firm with their directions. Lucas never made me feel unsafe while I was learning. We would go out every night past midnight in my mom's Highlander, and I would drive on empty highways to get a feel for merging, exiting, and changing lanes. I remember the first time I drove us somewhere during the day. It was to a Walmart that had several fast food places next to it, and I took us through 2 different drive-thru lines, going through the Burger King one twice because I wanted more mac and Cheetos. I was so happy that I was actually able to drive a car through a drive-thru, but I definitely accidentally pulled the car up onto the curb at least once. I took the driving test in my college town on some back roads with a kind young woman as the proctor, and everything went very smoothly. She was very kind to me, and I think she could sense how nervous I was to take that test. I passed. It felt like a huge relief, and years of weight lifted off me. I posted this photo to Instagram. It still took a few more months for me to get my first car, at least in October of 2017. I got it from a dealership just a half mile down the street from my place, but I was still afraid to drive it home that night due to it being my first time driving since I had moved to this new state. Taking it to Party City a few nights later for something I had to grab for work was a terrifying experience. I waited until it was late enough for the roads to be mostly unpopulated. That weekend I said fuck it, and I drove myself to visit my boyfriend in Ohio. And he cheered when I got there. Since then, my relationship with driving has basically normalized. If I don't have to deal with traffic, I usually enjoy it. I've never been in a crash, despite my mom and my sister, while moving me up to my new job, thinking I was asleep, betting that I would crash my car soon after I got it. Not cool, guys. For anyone who is looking for advice on how to get your license when it feels like it's too late, I have a few pieces of wisdom to dispense. Regardless of how old you are, it's never too late to learn how to drive. As a person who now has the hang of it, it's very second nature, and I think that once you get used to how the car operates, once you learn what the different pedals do, once you learn how to control your lights and your windshield wipers and check your mirrors and such, everything's pretty much second nature. You just have to have a solid amount of time practicing. My second piece of advice is, if you can, learn with someone who will be kind to you and patient with you as you pick up the basics. Learning how to drive with someone who raises their voice or doesn't let you make small mistakes is very damaging. If you have to, if your parents won't help you, see if a friend who has a car is okay with letting you take it to a parking lot. Learning how to drive is a really scary process, and because of all the things I had went through before I got my license, I felt a lot of anxiety even up to taking my test, and even past that when I got my first car and taking it out to drive. If you're a person who doesn't have their license right now, I know that it might seem like an insurmountable task. You might just be resigned to taking an Uber, living close to where you work, or relying on friends or family for rides, but it doesn't always have to be that way. And even if it's going to be a while before you can get a car, it's still a very useful skill to have. Yeah, I hope that this video and me talking about my experience helps somebody out there who's struggling with driving. I struggled with it for a really long time. I still occasionally experience a little bit of anxiety when I'm driving, but for the most part, it's become second nature to me. I think that's all for this week, guys. See you soon.